Me, it was about the witnesses. Like, you saw everything that happened. Then stand up for me. And then we live a life a certain way. We treat women a certain way. We walk out our day a certain way. But there was never a teaching for men that I thought. I saw so many men pinned down by women. I was just like, damn it, man. They're so evil. How did they become this evil? How are we going to fight back? Because we've already proven ourselves as being men of God, and these women are attacking us over and over and over and over to go over and over and over again. Right? I'm a fucking assassin. So it's give me the word and I'll and it's you just have to I always thought you have to be a punching bag for her. Like you have to. And she gets aggressive, she's pissed off, and now she's hitting her words, everything she's doing, she's showing you so much disrespect. And she's destroying you day after day after day after day after day, and you're being faithful to this woman, and now she's talking to another man. Now she's doing all this, and she's just out of control, right? The type of woman you don't want. And to actually have this type of experience, I think, is going to be what men needed. I always told her, I said, I'm going to start a men's group. And she didn't understand it. She was only thinking about herself the entire time. And it was, I'm going to start a men's group and we'll sit down, we'll talk about it because men are different than women. And then she married into a mafia family. So it was, no, you can't touch him. No, you can't do that. No, you have to act like a lady. And she really didn't like the lifestyle. She hated the life. And this is the life. All of us, we have a certain way of doing things. We show respect to each other. And a wife that's out of line, everybody knows that she was out of line. So I'm not even surprised that people came to me and corrected me on it. What do you want me to do? Well, either get her in line or get rid of her. Which one do you want to do? Like, we're ready. Like, the grave's dug for her. She got the black hand delivered to her at the door. I remember I even told you just got the black hand. Whatever you said and whatever you did, it was noticed in heaven and you just got the black hand. Like, what are you really thinking about your life right now? Because that was a black hand. That, that's it. That came from heaven. That came out of nowhere. And she was sitting there just yapping the entire time. Then I think she went to Heath and then she went to another man, and it was just heaven was sitting there watching her. Like, she's just, I think she was trying to,
way they do this is with a tool called ManyChat. Now, the crazy thing about using this tool is that this generates way more comments on your videos, which in turn will get Instagram to push it to more people. That not only means more views, but it also means it can sell your product or services 24/7 without you doing any extra work. Once you sign up for ManyChat and link your Instagram account, creating an automation is really simple. Just go over here to automations and click up here in the top right corner where it says new automation. Then you can select the trigger right here. I'll go over here and select user comments on your post or reel, and then select the post that you want to make this automation for. Then you can add the word that you want people to comment right here. Now you just add the message that you want to send them when they comment that word over here with a link to book a call, download your lead magnet, or check out your product. And that's it. You're completely set up and ready to roll. But don't just take my word for it. See how DM automation can work for yourself. Click the link below to get started with ManyChat now.
That's one of the dumbest things I could tell somebody. Being a made man. Dumb as shit. It's like sit down and just.
All right, here we go. Vlad TV would like to welcome Michael Franzese, the only high-ranking official of a major crime family to actually walk away without protective custody, without witness protection, and actually survive. Is that an accurate, description?
I would think so. To walk away publicly, as I have done over the past several years, yes.
So, your background is actually in the Colombo crime family.
Correct.
So let's go ahead and start in the beginning. When did the Colombo crime family actually launch and start?
Well, prior to it being the Colombo family, it was the Profaci family. And Joe Profaci was the original boss of that family. And it all occurred when Lucky Luciano broke up everything into, several different families, formed the commission, so on and so forth. So we're looking back to the, 40s, around there, when it really came into existence.
Okay, and there are 5 major crime families.
5 major families in New York. There are actually 9 throughout the country.
Oh, okay. So 5 in New York, 9 nationwide.
Correct.
And the Colombo was like the youngest in New York?
It could be. Colombo and Bonanno families were kind of the smaller of the families, I would say. My boss at the time used to like to say, we like quality, not quantity, in the amount of guys that we bring into the family.
So. Okay. So Joseph Colombo, I guess he served from like 63 to 71.
Correct.
Okay, and then the family was named after him at that point?
Yes.
During this time, how big was the Colombo crime family? Like how many members?
We had about 115 made members at the time, men that actually took the oath. And we had a lot of associates, obviously, guys that were around the life but didn't actually take the oath. They weren't made members, and they're known as associates. We had hundreds of them at the time.
Okay, were the associates considered soldiers or no?
No. Associates. When you come into the life and you take the oath, you come in as the position of a soldier. That's when you're a made man at that point.
Got it. Okay. And I guess during that time, there was a bunch of major wars that were happening in the Colombo family.
Yeah, back at that time, just prior to Joe Colombo becoming boss, we had the Gallo-Profaci War, when the Gallo brothers, who were part of the family, kind of revolted, and there was a war going on at that time. Colombo family, we've had our share of wars, during our existence. So that was, I was alive through that one, so it's one that I remember.
Okay, and what year was that around?
It was in the 50s into the 60s, yeah.
Okay, so we get into the 60s, Colombo takes over, and there's another war at that point?
Not really. They called it the Gallo-Colombo War also, but it was kind of like a spillover, because I think at the time the Gallos felt that they should be in control of the family, and so there was an internal war at that time over that, and it was eventually resolved.
Okay, and during these wars, basically guys are getting killed on both sides?
Yes.
Okay. How how bad were these murders getting at one point? Like, how many people were getting killed on a monthly basis?
Well, again, this was before my time actually as being involved in the life, but my dad was a prominent figure at the time.
Right.
And, quite a few went down during the Gallo-Profaci War, or Gallo-Colombo War. I don't know the exact number at the time, but I do remember some incidents with my dad since he was very active during that time. And I know that we hadn't seen him for a while. He was away because, he was, kind of undercover at that time. And quite a few guys were killed, I remember. It was a tough war.
Okay. So your grandfather was an associate, but not actually a made man.
That's correct, yes.
But then your father became a made man.
Yes.
And how did he end up joining that the whole family?
My father grew up in Brooklyn, and he was a tough kid, good kid, and he just caught the eye of, some of the older guys, some of the guys that were made at the time, and he started to hang with them. And, the way he tells me, my grandfather actually didn't want him to become part of the life, even though my grandfather was very well respected in our neighborhood in Greenpoint. But he never wanted to be involved, although he could have. He liked being, on the outside. And kind of cautioned my father to get involved because he said, once you do, your life is really not your own. But my dad had it in him, and, he ended up getting involved in the 30s, actually. He was young when he got inducted.
Okay, and he actually moved his way up to an underboss.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so describe the structure, because at the top you have the boss.
Right.
And then you have the underboss. And then the capo?
Yeah, you have a boss, an underboss, a capo regime or captain, and a soldier.
Okay.
And those are the four positions. There is a position called consigliere, and he's kind of appointed by the boss as his advisor. Actually, the position really is, he is a liaison between the men and the boss. Like if you have a gripe, about something that's going on in a family, you go to the consigliere, you're supposed to straighten it out with the boss. The only problem with that is that if you have a gripe with the boss and you go to the consigliere and he brings it to the boss, you're probably going to get killed. So you never gripe about the boss. It's not smart in that life.
Okay, so your dad actually moved up from a soldier to a capo,
Yes.
to an underboss.
Correct.
Is there a reason why he never became a boss?
He went to prison. Yeah, I believe until today that if my father were on the street and didn't get into the problems that he had, he would have been the boss at one point.
So here you are growing up in this family, and your dad is a high-ranking member of the Colombo family.
Right.
And you have siblings. You have a brother and a sister?
Yeah, I was one of 7, actually.
One of 7?
Yeah, I
Okay.
had 2 brothers and all those sisters.
Okay, all the same parents?
Actually, my father was married once before, so he had 3 children from his first marriage.
Okay, then four children
Yes.
with your mother. Okay, so you have this family, and you're growing up, and then, as a kid, you don't really know anything different, but you're starting to get older, and you're seeing that your dad is a little different than the other dads. There's more police presence, and there's more secrecy, and so forth. So at what point did you start to realize what's going on?
Well, it was early on because my dad was one of the highest profile figures of his day. He was kind of like the John Gotti of his day, if you can make that comparison. But law enforcement tactics against organized crime were different back then than they are today. Today everything is very covert. Undercover informants, high-tech surveillance equipment. Back then, when you were under investigation, they wanted you to know about it. And my dad was under investigation maybe for a period of about 10 years. Growing up in Brooklyn, later on Long Island, from 7 or 8 different agencies. And they would all have a big presence in our lives. They'd have their cars parked around our house 24/7. So whenever we would go anywhere as a family, we had a parade of law enforcement vehicles following us. So, I had a lot of scuffles with them early on, and their presence was there. So I grew up really hating the police. I hated the government, hated law enforcement.
So you would argue with the undercover cops, like in front of your house and so forth?
Yeah, I'd lead them on a wild goose chase if they thought my dad was with me, and they did some things to get even with me. And, so I always had scuffles with them along the way.
How is your dad doing his business if there's literally someone following him as soon as he comes home? As soon as he leaves the house to the point where he comes home again.
Well, he had to be very careful. If he had a meeting that he didn't want them involved in, he had to have an escape route. One of the ways we do it, we had homes in Brooklyn. We had a big family. My dad was one of 19, so he had relatives everywhere in Brooklyn. So he'd go in the door of one house, go through the backyard, into the other house, go out the front door of the others where I had somebody waiting, and the cops were still waiting for him at the other house. So when we were under surveillance, we had to devise different ways to try to shake the tail that we had.
Okay. So you had a high school graduation party.
Yeah.
And something interesting happened with that whole situation.
Yeah. Well, it was in our backyard. My dad put up a big tent, and we had entertainment. We had probably 500 people there, and all of my friends, they drove their cars, obviously, or they borrowed somebody's car to come to the event. And the police were around, detectives, Nassau County, I should say, and they took the license plate number of every car in the neighborhood, every single car. So several weeks later, friends of mine are starting to get subpoenas to go to the grand jury. And it was all about them attending, my graduation party. And if they drove somebody else's car, and that person wasn't even at the event, they got the subpoena because that's where they got the name from, that license plate number. So that was
Okay. I mean, in high school, was there a level of, hey, that's Michael, that's the son of so and so, you don't really want to mess with them, that type of thing, or were you just a regular high school kid?
Look, guys knew who my father was, and it was a thrill to some of them, to be around me, and to others, they didn't care. But, when I was younger, I had some issues of it because my dad had publicity, and you got a mafia father, and, I fight, so it was that kind of a thing early on. But it didn't hurt me too much, in that regard.
So during this whole time, your dad was not involving you in any of this. He wasn't mentioning it at home, nothing.
Oh, my dad wanted me to go to school and be a doctor.
Okay.
I was an athlete in school. He was very supportive of me as an athlete, attended all my games, and he wanted me to be legitimate.
Okay. So you graduated high school.
They will actually pay you for just playing their games. There's this app called Just Play. You can withdraw the money you earn every 3 hours. And get this, there's no minimum to cash out. You can play as much as you want, from puzzles to casual games. If you could use some extra cash, I know I did, you're gonna love it. You really need to give this a try.
She wanted to know, so I don't know how to.
I love you like la 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 la. I love you like la 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 la.
You go to college, and then your dad gets busted.
Yeah, in the early 60s, my dad was indicted several times, 3 times in the state of New York. Very serious crimes, grand larceny, homicide. Homicide was in Queens, actually. And he went to trial on all 3 of those cases over a period of a couple of years. He was acquitted, found not guilty. But then in 66, the feds indicted him for masterminding a nationwide string of bank robberies. He was convicted in 67 and sentenced to 50 years in prison. 1970, after he lost his appeals, he gets shipped off to Leavenworth Penitentiary to do his time, to begin his sentence. And I was a pre-med student, Hofstra University at that point. I was going to be a doctor, and I was devastated when Dad went in. I mean, he was 50 when he went in. I figured add 50 on top of that, he'd never come out of prison alive. So it was devastating.
Okay, and at that point, you started thinking about the whole mafia thing.
Well, what really happened, no, I can't say that. Joe Colombo had started the Italian-American Civil Rights League. What happened, his son, Joe Jr., had gotten indicted by the feds on some case for melting down coins for their silver value or something crazy like that. So Joey called us all up, and he said, hey, my son is being framed. We're not going to have this happen anymore to any of us. He said, we want to go down to the FBI building on 69th Street and 3rd Avenue in Manhattan. We're going to picket the FBI. So for me, hey, great. They framed my father. This is a chance for me to maybe help my dad out. So I was one of the first to be on that picket line. And I was a kid. I was 18, 19 years old. And that's how I started to get involved with people on that line.
Well, I guess Joe Colombo got shot right next to you, or?
Yeah, that Italian-American Civil Rights League grew into several 100,000 members. I mean, Joey had a lot of influence there, and it became a big deal. The feds hated it. Joey started to have some problems because, according to guys on the street, he was bringing too much attention to that life and so on and so forth. So we had a big rally. 1971 in Columbus Circle in Manhattan. Huge. There's probably 50,000 people there. And we had a big stage set up because entertainment. I mean, I think Sammy Davis was there. Sinatra was going to appear. We had top-notch entertainment, and he was going to talk about what the league was all about. And I'll never forget, it was a beautiful day, and I had just walked up on the stage, and Joey had handed me some brochures to hand out, up by a couple blocks up on 60th Street. And I took them, and because I was a captain in the league, not in the family at that point, in the league. I had a button. And I walked away. I was about 10 steps away, and all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. I heard shots run out, and somebody screamed, Joey was hit. Joey's been hit. He went down, and there was mass hysteria at that point.
So the boss of the family just got shot.
Yes.
Right next to you. Was he killed at that point or no?
No, he lingered for about 6 or 7 years, and then he eventually died. But he was in a coma the whole time.
Oh, okay. So pretty much that was the end of his
correct
his reign at that point. Was that the first time you saw mafia violence?
Yes, that was my first experience like that, of that seriousness, that gravity. Yes.
Okay, but you ended up joining the mafia after that.
Yes.
There wasn't a level of, okay, this is real. This is not the movies. This is what's really happening. Here's the head guy in my father's organization. He essentially was essentially killed.
Yeah.
And put in a coma after this situation. Maybe I'll stick to school instead.
Well, I had such a goal, a driving force in me to help my dad get out of prison. I believe my dad was framed. Because I asked him, I said, Dad, what's with these bank robbery charges? And he looked at me and he says, son, I'm innocent. And why I really believed him is because the 4 bank robbers that testified against him were all drug addicts. They're all junkies. And from the time I was a kid, my dad preached to me against drugs. He hated anything to do with drugs. So I said, why would he get involved with drug addicts? So I believed that he was innocent. He was framed. And I figured if I didn't help him out, he was going to die in prison. So I told him I lost interest in school. We were in the visiting room, Leavenworth Penitentiary. I said, Dad, I'm not going to school. If I don't help you out, you're going to die in here. And we kind of went at it a little bit. Your mother's going to be upset. You're leaving school. I said, Dad, it's too late. My mind's made up. And he said, okay, but if you're going to be on the street, I want you on the street the right way. And his mind, the right way is to become a member of his life. So he proposed me for membership at that point in time. Because, you become a member of that life. You can't just go up to somebody and say, hey, I'd like to join. Somebody's got to propose you, vouch for you, say you have what it takes. So in my case, it was my dad. He sent word downtown. He said, my son, I'm proposing him for membership. And that's how it started.
Okay, so you became a recruit at that point.
Correct.
This was what year?
This was in around 72.
Okay. And a year and a half later, you became a made man.
Correct.
During that time, were they just sending you out on missions and so forth?
The way they ran it down to me, the boss at that time, he's now passed on, Tom DeBella. He said, Mike, I got a message from your father. He said, you want to become a member of our life? Is that true? I said, yes. Here's the deal. From now on, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're on call to serve this family, the Colombo family. That means if your mother is sick and dying and you're at her bedside, we call you to service. You leave your mother and you come and serve us. From now on, we're number one in your life, before anything and everything. And if we feel you deserve this privilege, you earn the honor to become a member, we'll let you know. So basically, I'm on call 24/7 to do whatever I was told to do.
Okay. What were the worst things you had to do during that time?
Look, I always say this, it's a tough question to answer, but I like to be as honest as I can be. A lot of menial things, drive the boss to a meeting, sit in a car for 5 hours, that until he comes out. You had a meeting at 8 o'clock, you weren't there at 7:30, you were late. You can never be late in that life, never. Stuff like that. And then, look, I'll be honest, that life at times is very violent. And if you're part of the life, you're part of the violence, and there's no escape. If you're told to do something, you do it or you pay the price. So to say I wasn't part of that would not be truthful.
How did you take to the violence yourself at that point? Because you were, a teenager at that point, or 20?
No, I was when I got straightened out, I was 24. So, but I was recruited at 22.
Okay, so you're in your early 20s.
Yeah.
And now you're essentially being forced to do these violent acts, or else, right?
Well, look, I had a choice. I could have said no and walked away at that time and just gave it all up, but I didn't. So I don't like to see anybody push me into it. I made a conscious choice to do this. And, I'll be honest with you. Look, I can't say I was comfortable with everything that I had to do during that time, but I did it. You know, I didn't want to displease my dad, and I didn't want anybody to think I didn't have what it takes to do what I had to do. So, you know, when you have to do things that are unpleasant, at least in my experience, you kind of step outside of yourself if you're capable of doing that. Do what you have to do, and then, you know, you move on.
Okay. So then a year and a half later, you were actually made.
Correct.
And there was a ceremony where they burned something in your hand, I believe.
Yeah, it was a picture of a saint, Catholic altar card. They prick your finger, some blood drops on the floor, and they burn a saint in your hands, and you take an oath.
Okay. And you actually came in with another group of guys.
Yeah. It was in the early 70s or the mid 70s, they had the expression that they opened the books, meaning that they were starting to bring in a lot of guys. Prior to that, for about 20 years, they weren't making any new guys. The only way they would make a guy in a family is if they had to replace a guy that died. But then in the mid 70s, they opened the books up and they were taking guys. The families were building up.
Okay. You were part of that buildup.
Yes.
Now, out of the guys that joined in with you, only one of them is still alive.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And there were, what, 5 or 6 guys?
Well, the guys, the night that I took the oath, there were 6 of us. I'm the only one alive out of them.
Okay.
I'm the only one alive out of that group. But there are some guys that took the oath during that period of time that are still alive.
So now you're a made man in the mafia.
Yes.
How did that feel?
You know, it felt good. I mean, you know, this is what I aspired to be at that point in time, and I kind of did, you know, I paid my dues to get into that life. So, you know, when I got in, I wanted to be the best possible mob guy I could be, I'll be honest. I was motivated to do 2 things. I wanted to get my dad out of prison, and I was helpful in that. We did get him out on parole after serving almost 10 years, and I wanted to make money. My dad said, you know, in that life you make money, it translates to power, not unlike the real world. So I was fortunate. I had a head for business, and I knew how to use that life to benefit me in business. I was very aggressive. I brought some new things into the family that hadn't been done before. So I was successful in that regard.
Okay, so you come in now, you're a made man, you're a soldier at this
Yes.
point. So you don't have a crew.
Well, I had a crew of associates.
Associates?
Yeah, I didn't have a crew of made guys, right.
So you had a crew of associates. How many guys in the beginning?
Oh, gosh, probably 20.
Okay, a nice group of people.
Good size, yeah.
Good sized group of people. And you guys start doing crimes.
Correct.
Okay, so what were some of the early money-making schemes in the beginning?
You know, everybody that's involved in that life, you start shylocking, putting money out on the street on usurious, you know, for usurious interest rate. So I did that.
So let's talk about that for a second. So a regular guy has a gambling problem and he gambled off his rent that month. He needs a couple $1,000s. He can't go to the bank because he's already maxed out on everything. He goes to you, says, I need $2,000 right now.
Correct.
You give it to him. At what interest rate?
Depends. You know, it depends on who it is and what the circumstances were. You know, for me, it was anywhere from 1% a week up to 5% a week. That's what I would charge.
20% a month.
Yeah.
So that means that if you gave him $1,000, he owed you $1,200 at the end of the month.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
What happens if he doesn't pay?
Well, you know what? For the most part, people pay. And, you know, sometimes you make a deal. But look, you know, people that are out to beat you, and you find that out. For instance, we lend money to a gambler. You know, he says, I promise I'm not going to gamble anymore, and he's going to pay. And then we find out he's gambling everywhere else around town, and he can't pay you. Well, he may pay a significant price for that, yeah. Put a guy in a hospital, hurt him, yeah, it happens.
Okay. So you and your associates are out there putting money on the street and making that money back.
In my case, most of the time, I would give the money to my associates, and they would put it out to somebody else. So I held my associate responsible, really.
Okay. Is a lot of money made through shylocking when you were doing it at that point? Or is it just, okay, it's enough to get by, but this is not really what my aspiration is?
Well, I'll tell you, when I was rolling pretty high, and I had income from a lot of different areas, I had almost $1 million on the street.
$1 million
Yeah.
in loans.
Yeah, out to various people, whether they be in business, whether they were my own guys. And I was collecting, you know, 2 points, maybe 5 points a week. It all depended. I probably average about 3% a week on the million. So it was a lot of money.
Okay, so $1 million That's $30,000 a week
Yeah.
in just interest. Okay, pretty good.
It's good money.
Okay. What were some of the biggest things you were loaning money on?
You know, a lot of times in business, guy owned a club. I got involved with a number of clubs. They always need money, and so you got a good shot at getting your money back because they have cash flow.
Okay.
We're in the club, we're watching, we see what's going on. We got the register there, we got the guy. So I tried to, make my loans to people that I knew had the capacity to pay. Obviously, you don't want to give it to anybody. So people in business, normally you had a shot.
Okay. And, you see movies like, for example, Goodfellas, where you see these type of scenarios play out where the person can't pay and now the mafia guy is a partner in the business. Was that happening?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it was a way to get involved in a business. Like, there were times when, okay, I don't want my money back, but I'm your partner. It's one of those things. I mean, it's a way we used to get in the door, yes.
All right, the way this really works. Shit. Ugh. I was born a made man, so how I saw my father's business, he hated violence. He hated everything, almost like he was fragile. The amount of love he actually is. And then me hitting the streets. I always felt sometimes I was protecting him. The way I grew up, no, he made sure that the other person had more money than I did. And he made sure that person could do whatever they wanted. And that I would sit there and watch it. Unless that guy, and then he'd give that guy the chance to give me the money to have a McDonald's meal. It used to be $2.99. And the guy would take the money that my father actually gave that guy, and he'd give me fries. And the guy would, and I remember recess one day, I just got tired of it and I just rocked him. Like, he hit me so hard because of my mercy. And I remember I humiliated him afterwards for it. I rocked him, and then my entire class just started chanting and humiliating him. And the devil is such a bitch, man. Once he's beat, he's sitting there like praying for help and everything like that. And just, I think that was the first lesson that he actually taught me. Like, if you actually want to be a part of this family, I'm the boss. So I kind of know. Nah, man. It's not like that. We don't extort. If I signed somebody to my family, it's, if you're anointed, yeah, you can't be touched. And there has to be retaliation for that, but mostly it's, if I'm assigning earners and I'm like, yo, get out there and make some money, I'm lighting a fire underneath them. Like, yeah, I don't see why they would expect the boss not to be that way. But nah, it's mostly free will, and just the mess is because I can kill you and I don't. That's the frustrating part, really. It's I don't fucking need cops. I don't need detectives. If I want you dead, you will be dead. And it's that silliness, that stupid, like, thought process that human beings think that they have a chance to walk around without. This could be your last moment of breathing if I decide. And then you're talking all this shit to me. And just, what? You know, Mary's sitting there like, I got you this house, I did all this. You think you did something for me? I could have told you what you did for me. I know you didn't do that for me. You did that for yourself. I'm just stepping in. So leave it at that.